Hello, and welcome to Visible School Improvement. My name is Elisa Barrett, and I am the Director of Instruction for Greenfield Exempted Village Schools. Today, I would like to share with you how our district is building a culture of visible learning through the Ohio Improvement process. Our district vision statement is, the Greenfield Exempted Village School District will build a culture of visible learning and a legacy of leadership that empowers all students and staff to embrace challenges, persevere, take ownership, and continuously grow as engaged learners. This vision statement is based on the Visible Learning Framework. You will notice on the graphic there are 4 different components to becoming a visible learner: learning dispositions, assessment capability, learning processes, and feedback. Our work is truly collaborative. It has taken many different teams and team members to compile our plans that we have in place. To begin, our district leadership team always starts with the why. Why do we need to do this work in our district? So in reviewing many pieces of student and adult data, we determine the need for students and staff to focus on learning and not just behavior. This led us to the work of visible learning. We reviewed the visible learning framework and determined the pieces that we wanted to begin with. We then planned steps to implementation. We realized as we moved through the why to the how to the what, that this would not take just 1 year. Instead, we wanted to be focused in one area deeply, make sure that it's done thoroughly in the district and that it's truly a part of our culture before moving on to our next step. To plan this implementation, we created a visible learning planning team. This team is made up of members from the district leadership team. Together, we created a district vision statement based on the visible learning framework, and we set long and short-term goals. This team also worked very hard to determine the beginning professional learning needs and activities for our district. Next, Dr. Kathy Lassiter entered into the picture. Dr. Lassiter is an author and consultant for Corewin Learning. Dr. Lassiter has been contracted to facilitate learning sessions for our DLT, our BLT, TBTs, and administrators. Dr. Lassiter has provided individual coaching as well as whole group coaching sessions and instruction to meet all of our different professional learning needs through this process. There are 3 priority goals and targets that we have as we move through our plan. Our first priority goal and target is to make sure that everything we're doing is connected to our Ohio improvement process. We believe strongly that if you try to do too many things, they're not going to last. They will not become a part of the culture. So we used our One Needs assessment process to determine the specific needs and priorities within all of our schools, and then looking at how does that connect across the district. We determined that standards-based instruction was not to the level that it needed to be, and that we could utilize our visible learning framework to improve that area within our district. We decided to embed professional development and data collection into the BLT, DLT, and TBT plans and processes so that once again, everything is connected and focused on one specific area. So you'll notice that I have laid out the DLT, the BLT, and the TBT and how visible learning connects in our district to this process. So at the DLT level, we collect district, adult, and student data to monitor the progress throughout our plan. We feel that our main job and duty as the DLT is to support adult learning through the process and to support our BLT's implementation and needs. At our monthly DLT meeting, BLT members present to the rest of the DLT how the plan is going in their specific building. They share building-specific data, and then we use that to inform our next steps. At the BLT level, members collect building-level adult and student data to monitor the progress. This is collected in various ways. For example, in one of our buildings, all BLT members, even teachers, are responsible for collecting pieces of the data. Each BLT takes on the duty of supporting adult learning and the TBT's implementation and specific needs. Finally, at the TBT level, all teachers collect classroom-level adult and student data in which they analyze to monitor the needs and progress. Embedded within the 5-step process, all of our teams have been unwrapping vertical power standards weekly, and they share their LISC, which stands for Learning Intentions and Success Criteria, weekly. Our priority goal and target number 2 is to build a culture of learning for all students through the use of common learner dispositions in grades preschool through 12th. Student knowledge and articulation of a good learner versus a good student is also one of our targets. In learning about the Visible Learning Framework, one of the foundational pieces is learning dispositions. Kids have to know how to be a good learner for them to learn. What are those skills that they need to have to be able to truly learn the content? Our Visible Learning Planning team examined many different learner dispositions and determined that we would select 5 dispositions to use consistently throughout the district. Not only are the dispositions themselves consistent, but also the definition and what that looks like and sounds like is the same, no matter what classroom you walk into within our district. The 5 dispositions that we decided to use are takes ownership, good learners are engaged, good learners grow continuously, good learners embrace challenges, and good learners are ready to persevere. All throughout our district, one of our goals is to make sure that the learning is visible, meaning that wherever you look on the walls throughout the different schools, you can see evidence of learning taking place. And so that starts with those learner dispositions. A common question that we ask our students is, what makes a good learner a good learner? I'll show you some data here in just a moment that shows when we started out on this journey, students didn't know. It was all about behavior and sitting still and listening to the teacher. And so we're trying to mold and change that culture of just looking at behavior, but then also what does it take to truly learn? So you'll notice on this slide there are different picture examples from our district. Specifically, you'll notice there's what's called a learning pit. And so all of these tigers are down in the learning pit, and they are using their learner dispositions to come out of the pit. One of the key components of using learner dispositions is helping kids and all learners, even staff and our adult learners, to understand that it's okay to struggle when you're learning. That's where the learning takes place, and that's when you're down in the pit. But when you use your dispositions and you use the things that you're learning, you can pull yourself out of the pit, and then you are so much higher in your knowledge when you come out of that pit. As I mentioned, we have various data collection pieces that we're conducting and analyzing throughout the district to monitor our progress. So this example is provided by Greenfield Middle School. You'll notice that in September of 2020, when students were asked the question, what makes a good learner a good learner? 83.6% of students talked about good behavior or did not respond. They didn't know what a learner truly was and were quite confused with the question. But by April of 2021, Greenfield Middle School had 66.3% of their students that were able to state 2 or more of the learner dispositions. And not only when we ask the question, do they just state what the disposition is, but then they also provide an explanation. So we feel that the progress with our students being able to talk about their dispositions and what it means to be a good learner has shown incredible growth in just our first year. Our priority goal and target number 3 is to learn how to utilize the evidence-based strategy Teacher Clarity in planning standards-based instruction and assessments. We aim to provide clarity to students also in their learning through a transition from objectives to learning intentions and success criteria. If you recall, when I started sharing our presentation, I shared that we determined one of our needs was standards-based instruction. We decided through many different conversations and teacher surveys and looking at various data points that our instruction and our objectives were not tightly aligned to the rigor that was required and is required in the standards and the state test. So the Teacher Clarity process is a process that teachers use to really unwrap their standards and get to know them at a deep level and then use that knowledge to plan instruction. We've unwrapped standards before in the summer for taken a few days and unwrapped every standard and gotten to know them. And then we go back to our classrooms and teach and don't have those standard-based discussions with our peers. And so through this process, we're taking one standard a week with our teams in our TBT meetings and truly unwrapping the standards and looking at the DOK level that's required in the standard, and having vertical conversations and collaborative conversations with our peers, and then planning the instruction. And so that's where Teacher Clarity comes into play. How well does the teacher truly understand and know their standard? The second part is clarity for students. So how is that communicated to students? Can students talk about their learning? Can they talk about what it means to be successful? And so you'll notice there on the screen, there's a image from the Teacher Clarity Playbook. That is the resource that we used throughout our professional learning and our adult learning during this process. So this book contains 9 different 2 to 3 page modules. So really short, brief explanation of the different steps of the process. And then it takes the form of gradual release of responsibility, where it provides examples to teachers and whoever's reading the book about that module. And then it gives them an opportunity to do some guided practice with peers and then some independent practice. And that is the case for every single module. We've done other book studies in the district, but this study has been probably the deepest study we've had in our implementation, but also, like I said, it was short yet meaningful, very informative and to the point. So, we all have busy lives, but we could read 2 pages, 3 pages to really further our learning. And so through our 5-step process, the learning is not just in one session at the very beginning of the year. It's embedded throughout every TBT meeting. And at some buildings, they have a monthly whole staff TBT meeting in which they bring their Teacher Clarity Playbook and do different learning activities with the book together as a whole staff. These are 3 examples of learning intentions and success criteria for our district. So I mentioned that we were transitioning from writing learning objectives to learning intention success criteria. The reason for that is learning intention success criteria breaks down that learning objective so that students can use what's called the success criteria to self-assess and self-monitor their learning. So as you look at the first grade example, you'll notice that the teacher has spelled out very clearly for the students what they're learning. I am learning to count and write numbers to 120. The success criteria is the second part. I will know I have learned it when I can. So this is the part where students can self-assess their learning along the continuum of being able to count and write numbers to 120. And so students would start by counting by tens. Then they count by ones. Then they count on a hundreds chart. And so each of those success criteria have different strategies or a different lesson in which the teacher is instructing and guiding their students. You'll notice in the 6th grade ELA example, this teacher is focusing on developing a plot for a narrative. So this is a day or two worth of a lesson. So it's not a big unit. Obviously, the teacher has, focused in on today in our writing, we're just going to look at plot. And so when you are developing a plot for the narrative, these are the steps that you need to take. And that would be the success criteria. I will know I've learned it when I can. Create well-developed characters. Describe the setting. Consider the conflict and resolution. Design a plot sequence that flows. And so what students are able to do is go to the success criteria and basically check off. Can I do these things? Do these things, are they included in my writing? And so if they are, then I have learned how to develop a plot for my narrative. The third example is from our Honors Algebra 2 class. It's been very impressive for our high school math department to be able to take these large, complex standards and break them down into language that is student-friendly and written in a way that students can do that self-assessing and self-monitoring. So you'll notice for this series of lessons, this teacher is wanting students to know that they are learning to expand binomial expressions using the binomial theorem. That would be called the learning intention. Then the success criteria is, I will know I have learned it when I can, and then she's wanting the students to be able to do those pieces to show that they've learned how to expand the binomial expressions using the binomial theorem. So how is this affecting our students? We've written learning objectives or I can statements for years upon years, and it's typically in our district, it's been something that's been posted on the board because that's what our evaluation says that we need to have, right? But through the process of learning intention success criteria, our ultimate goal, going back to that why are we doing this? Our ultimate goal is so that students can talk about their learning, so that students can self-assess, and so that students can self-monitor. So what do we do to collect that data? We ask students. So to monitor the progress of the learning intentions, we have certain data collection points throughout the year, and we go and we just talk to kids. And so once again, this is staying with the Greenfield Middle School. This is a piece of their data. In September of 2020, you'll notice that we'll go with the middle number. So level 2 is if you ask a student, what are you learning today? They can describe what they are doing, not what they're learning. For example, oh, we are doing a math problem, or we are doing this worksheet, or, well, today we're sorting. What we want to know is, what are they learning? What is the content? What is the standard that they're learning? So in September of 2020, 61.8% of our middle school students were focused on the doing and not the learning. April of 2021, within our first year, you'll notice that 69.7% are starting to grasp it. And when asked the question, what are you learning today? They're able to discuss what they're learning directly related to the learning intention. So what that teacher is posting is being used. It's not just an objective written on a board and not discussed, but it is being used during class, throughout the class, at the beginning to introduce, as an exit ticket at the end of class to assess students' learning, but students are starting to get it. What about success criteria? In the end, this is the most important piece. Can students self-assess and self-monitor? Because that's how they become a visible learner. In September of 2020, 54.5% of our students, when they talked about success, it was all about grades, tests, or finishing their work. But is that truly what makes someone successful in their learning? We didn't feel it was. By April of 2021, 52.8% of our students were able to explain their learning related to items in the success criteria. So going back to the example I shared with you a few minutes ago, if you were to ask a student who was writing a narrative, how will you know that you've successfully developed a plot for your narrative? This student, if they had scored in the blue, would be able to provide all of the different pieces of success criteria that needed to be within their narrative. The most important piece of our plan is our adult learning and our adult follow-through. We no longer can have sit and get day-long sessions and expect change to happen and take place and become a part of the culture within our district. That's what our teams have decided, and we are working so hard to move to more of job-embedded professional development. And so you'll notice on the screen there are lots of different picture examples as things that have taken place throughout this school year to teach our adults and to invest in our adults and their learning. So some of the examples in the first picture on the top left, we have vertical content meetings that are focused solely on the work of visible learning and our plan of starting with teacher clarity. Something new to our district that came actually from Dr. Kathy Lassiter, this is an idea she has brought to our district. They're called learning walks. And so you'll notice in the top right-hand picture is a teacher taking notes. And so we've engaged in small groups of teachers in each building, going around for about 30 minutes together as a group and going into classrooms, active classrooms where kids are actively learning, teachers are actively teaching, and looking at the learning intention success criteria and asking kids these questions of what makes a good learner, and taking notes and discussing out in the hallway together, what did you see in that classroom? What can you learn from that? What do you want to take back to your room? And so this is a step in moving from an evaluatory walk to it's all about the learning and it's adults sharing ideas and adults learning from each other. The bottom two pictures are examples of small group coaching sessions that Dr. Lassiter and myself have had with teachers throughout the district. And so in these examples, teachers were bringing their unwrapped standards, written as learning intention success criteria, and sharing them with each other and then also with us and receiving examples, looking at different pieces of the learning intention success criteria and how they could be strengthened through feedback. So what's our next steps? We are not finished with our teacher clarity work. That is the most important piece. It is the foundation of all of the visible learning work. Before jumping to all of the hundreds of fantastic strategies and focusing on those strategies within the work of John Hattie, we need another year to make sure that our learning intention success criteria are strong and based on the standards. And so we've decided that next year we're going to really hone in on our success criteria and refining the wording, refining the steps, making sure they're in complete tight alignment to what's required in the standards. Because here's our why. We want to make sure it can be used by students to self-monitor and self-assess. So you'll notice we already have some pieces throughout the district. This is one example from a kindergarten classroom in which students are being asked to self-monitor and self-assess. So the learning intention success criteria is we are learning to write. We know we have learned it when we can. And in a kindergarten classroom, in sequential order, these are the pieces or the steps to success for students. The teacher went a step further and has provided exemplars. And so it's also color coded. The first picture in red matches the first step in the success criteria. So what students are able to do, and what our students do, is they take their writing work that they have completed up to this board, and they can self-assess, and they can check, and they can see, did I write some letters or words? If I did, I've met that criteria. Did I use sight words? I know I'm going to look at the yellow. Does my paper look like what's on the yellow example? If so, I can check off that criteria, and so forth. And then our second piece is feedback. So when our learning intentions and success criteria are strong and teachers have clarity, we have to have our students using the learning intention success criteria. Remember, I said going away from it just being posted on the board. How is it being used? And so one way to utilize learning intentions and success criteria beyond just self-assessment and self-monitoring is providing feedback to peers and feedback to yourself based on the learning intentions and success criteria. So our visible learning plan team is working this summer to make our next steps and our short-term goals for the coming year. One piece of data that I have not shared with you yet is our teacher self-reflection survey. And so we have data from going into classrooms and looking around and checking and more in an evaluatory way. We have the student voice data in which we ask students questions. We found it important to also have what we call teacher voice. So what are teachers feeling and saying? Not just what can you see when you go in the room, but how are they feeling, and where do they feel strong? Where do they feel that they need some additional learning? And so we feel that this helps for each of us to be able to take ownership of our own learning. So we have a self-reflection survey that staff members have completed several times throughout the year. This survey is based on the different pieces and parts of teacher clarity and learner dispositions. And then our DLT and BLT and TBTs review the data and use it to monitor our progress and to determine our next steps and where we need to move forward. So what is our impact? That's the main question that we need to ask ourselves as we go through a school improvement process. We've determined so far we have 3 pieces of impact. First, our students can articulate what they are learning, how they will know they have learned it, and why they are learning. Our second impact is that students and staff do take ownership, embrace challenges, persevere, are engaged, and grow continuously. Third, students and staff will provide, accept, and utilize feedback to deepen their learning and knowledge. That third impact, as I've already mentioned, will be our focus for next school year. Thank you for listening to the brief example of our district's vision as we move through the visible learning work. If you have any questions about our plan or how you might start a visible learning process or journey in your own district, I would be happy to speak with you at any time. Feel free to email me at elisa.barrett@greenfieldmclean.org. Thank you and have a wonderful summer.